I'm Lenny Magill. Over the past several years, I've been producing videotapes for the shooting industry. In particular, the firearms-related pistol competitions known as the Steel Challenge and the Bianchi Cup. Now, at these tournaments, I've had the opportunity to interview some of the best pistol shooters in the world. We talked about their techniques, their stance, their trigger pull, their practice methods, even the type of guns they use. This tape is a compilation of those interviews. It's called Pistol Masters. So whether you're a beginning shooter or an accomplished shooter and been shooting for a while, I'm sure that you're going to be able to learn something from the best pistol shooters in the world. So without any further delay, let's get started in what I like to call Pistol Masters.
First of all, I'd like to say I became quite proficient at golf, so I've kind of patterned my approach to shooting in the same way you would approach learning golf, which is watching the better players, shooters. The shooting technique I use today is a combination of several of the shooters. The stance and weight distribution I've patterned after John Shaw. The upper body position I like Michael Plaxco's. So I try and position my shoulders and my upper body as Michael. The grip, I've always been impressed by Robert Leatham, and he seems to have more control over his trigger and sight picture than anybody, so I've tried to pattern my grip after Robert. And as far as mental attitude and the way I handle myself before I shoot, Brian Enos would be the name copy there. The draw is Pat and Chip McCormick. I came up with that on my own. It was natural, and it works real good for me. What I try and do as far as what part of my trigger finger I use, I try and use the same part of my finger that I would push a button with. I try and, in all my approaches to shooting, which again this comes from golf as I referred to earlier, I try and make it simple, and I try and use moves that are very common and natural to my everyday life. That's how come I feel like that part of my finger is most sensitive and I have the most control over it, is the part that I push a button with. It's the same way I align with the targets. I try and stay basically parallel because I walk straight forward and normally talk to somebody in a squared up position. I wear the gun on what's called the strong side, which is the same side as my shooting hand, and just slightly forward of the hip, and I point the muzzle to the rear of my body, which I believe I'm about the only one that does that now.
So the handle, the grip itself is kind of cocked towards your hand.
Yeah, exactly. What that does is where the grip safety and the handle of the gun are positioned, it puts a nice little Y in there, which I can fit my hand into real fast. A lot of the guys wear the gun back, which pulls the grip safety down, and I always had a hard time getting my hand around that grip safety. So that's why I position the gun that way, and I have no trouble getting a grip with it. I seldom sit on one particular course of fire and do a lot of shooting on it. I try and start shooting a score, just like it's going to be shot in the match. In the matches, you seldom get a chance to shoot enough to get warmed up. So that's the reason I just shoot for scores, is basically what counts is how well you shoot cold. And so I feel like it's more important to just shoot, as we do here, 5 runs with a throwaway and stop and analyze that, sit out for 5-10 minutes, and then maybe come back and shoot it again. I feel like a lot of the shooters I know that could do better, they sit there until they're ankle deep in brass, and then they try and come out and shoot the same speed they were able to do when they were warmed up, and they forget that they have to come out here and do it cold. So I think that's the key to the practice, is go out to the range and find out what you can do when you're cold, not when you're warmed up. For me, my first step is to make sure that my equipment is ready. That means the gun's loaded, the magazine's full, the earphones are in position, the glasses, all the equipment is correct. After that, before I take my stance, I look at the course of fire, and on each particular course of fire you have different key thoughts that you use that help you be successful on that course of fire. Sometimes it's just 2 key thoughts, sometimes it may be as many as 5 or 6. And before I take my stance, I'll run through those key thoughts in the order of importance. As I come into my shooting stance and finally get ready to shoot into the final shooting position, I try and reduce it to 1 or 2 key thoughts. And while I'm waiting to hear that buzzer, those are the 1 or 2 key thoughts that I'm running through my mind.
What do they usually say on this event? 5 to go.
Most commonly on all the stages, my key thoughts are to try and shoot the center of the plate with a good sight picture and to move the gun smoothly. If I start to really push the gun, move the gun too fast, then again you get tight and you miss and you get slow. A lot of people feel like the draw is what's holding them back. They get psyched out by the draw, and of course I'd say most of the good shooters, their most common practice when they're not practicing for a particular match is to draw and fire one shot, because from the start position, if you can get a good grip on the gun and then bring the gun into a perfect shooting position time and time again, well, sweeping several plates is Mickey Mouse after you get that first lock in on that first plate. So yeah, the draw is probably the toughest move. As the gun comes up into the shooting position, I start to acquire my focus on the sight actually before I lock into my shooting position.
Really?
Yes, and I feel like that's been a big help to me in speeding up my draw. I know a lot of the other shooters throw the gun out there, then identify the sights, and then position the sights on the target. Well, and actually when I draw, I bring the gun up in front of my face a little sooner and then stab at the target, so I have that length to get the sight on the target and focus on it.
Are you a shooter that looks down at your gun while you draw, or do you look at the target while you draw?
No, I feel that you'll never reach your potential if you're looking at the gun. If you don't know where the gun is by the time you come out here to the match, and this is nothing against the shooters that do, it's just my honest opinion, if you don't know where the gun is when you come out here, then you're not going to be shooting to your potential. You're just slowing yourself down. You have got to be looking at the target to position the sights on that target quickly, and the key here is you don't want your head to move. If your head's moving, your eyes are moving, the gun's moving, you've got 3 different objects moving that you're trying to coordinate on that first shot. So in my opinion, you want the eyes and the head as still as you can when the draw, so that the only moving object is the gun. This gun was a new concept. It's built specifically for steel shooting. That's all it's good for. It's designed to shoot light loads. What we did here is we extended the frame and attached the muzzle brake to the frame, and then we locked the barrel into this muzzle brake, which means it's a rather unique gun in the sense that the barrel locks into the frame front and rear. And I believe it's about the only gun in the match that locks up that way.
Wow.
And the reason for that is it takes all the weight off the barrel, which allows me to shoot a lighter load.
I see. What type of modifications have you done throughout here? Anything else on the target?
Basically, the rear end of the gun is just very precision fit. There's nothing, no deviation from the standard configuration of John Browning's design as the gun comes from the factory. It's just well tuned and precision fit, so that the trigger pull's real light, and the slide is very tightly fit to the frame, so that the accuracy is consistent.
How often do you clean this or maintain it? What do you have to do? Anything?
Basically every 400 rounds I clean the gun. If you don't keep a gun clean, it will wear itself out faster. So I keep it clean so it'll last me longer. Before the match, 2 days before the match, I'll take the gun completely apart, clean every little piece. Then I'll go out the day before the match and foul it out slightly. And it's funny, a clean gun has jammed on me more than a slightly fouled gun in my experience. So I never hit a match with a completely clean gun. I don't know if it's an omen or what it is.
Well, is there a special finish on that at all? Is that a nickel finish down in the bottom?
No, quite actually. This gun, as you can see, is pretty raw. It's not a show gun, it's a race gun. This is just what I call metal in the white. It has no finish on it. It's just polished, and then the upper half has been blued, and the only reason I did that was to keep the glare down while I'm shooting. The reason I didn't put any finish on the lower half is I'm always playing with or changing something, and when you put a finish on a gun, you ruin the finish if you try and change anything. So this gun's always going through constant changes. Last year I shot it at 45 ounces, and this year, as you can see, there's a hole here with a void in there, and that's because I took 2 ounces off the gun to make it a little lighter, and that worked pretty well this time.
What I like to do is I like to get in a position to where I have the shortest amount of travel to the holster. Some people like to stay way far out. I like to get in close, so the least amount of travel is always the best. When I come out of that leather, I try and get a real good grip on the gun. I let myself take just a little more time on the grip so I can get a good grip for my shot. I see my sights as soon as I come up out of the holster, and put it right on the first plate, for example, in this match, and go from there. And just once you get a good first shot, the cadence goes from there. What I like to do is when I'm behind the line, when someone else is shooting, I like to actually visualize myself shooting the stage, visualize doing well on the stage. You know, you never want to visualize blowing out. You want to always visualize that you did well on that particular stage, and then repeat it. You know.
So you mentally see it first.
Mentally see it first. Mentally shoot it. And I've been doing a lot of practicing that way too, believe it or not, the mental practicing. Okay, I wear it with what they call strong side, which is on the right side of the body, canted a little forward for a natural grab. When I mean a natural grab, some people put their holster a little back further, and they have to break their shoulder. What I mean by break their shoulder is bend their shoulder, and that to me is uncomfortable. I try to do everything as natural as possible. Come down smooth, natural, and come out. Strong side, my leather is Gordon Davis. Okay, what you want to do is hold your hands, in this particular match, hold the hands up high. This is why I hold them. I come down, don't disconnect the safety until you're out of the holster about here. Then you knock it off. I've seen people knock the safety off, good shooters knock the safety off in their holster. Very, very dangerous. If you do that, you get into problems. But most of them are very safe, and they draw the gun, come out, knock the safety off, and point it at the target. I hold kind of like a boxing stance. If you were a boxer, they stand with their left foot forward and their right foot back, and their hands are up. That's exactly how I do it. Just real natural.
Feels good.
Just no one taught me how to shoot. I taught myself. Just what I learned is if you do something that's natural to your body, my particular frame, that's the way it works for me. Some people are taller, they hold their hands different. Just you can't be mechanical. You can't watch he's a great shooter and say that's what I'm going to do. Sometimes it doesn't work for you. I grip it around here fairly tight. My left thumb over my right thumb over the safety. I took this safety off because it interferes with this type of shooting. And just basically put it up just like that.
Let's see the other side of your hand. Just rotate it around. Ah, I see. Now, when do you take the safety off? What moment are we at?
The way, say I have a holster here, come down, grab the gun like this. When I'm coming up, this is where I knock it off, right here. That's very safe.
Yeah.
You don't want to knock it off here and have your finger in there. So I want to come up and knock it off just like that.
So I guess it gets automatic after practice.
Oh yeah, just automatic. You don't think about it anymore. Just it's a reaction. What I like to do is set up different events, not necessarily the exact events that we shoot at the Steel Challenge, because if you over practice these particular events, what you start doing is start shooting it as just a motion. You're just going by the motions, and that's the worst thing you can do, because when you come down here, if the plate's 2 inches or 3 inches different that you've been practicing all week, you're going to throw you off.
Muscle memory. Yeah.
Muscle memories. So I don't practice that way. I like to practice mostly just shooting different scenarios, and then of course practicing the Steel Challenge. I am sponsored by a company by the name of SIG, S-I-G. This is 9mm, loaded a little bit down. It's not the regular 9mm that you would shoot in factory. It's not a factory load. It's a little bit lighter than factory load. The first thing I did on it, Mr. Bruce Gray did this for me. He did a beaver tail, which was very important because it was biting my hand when it was coming back. Mr. Jim Bolan, 2 gunsmiths worked on this gun. He did the grips and the safety, and most of the cosmetic work was done by Jim Bolan. Gray did the compensator and did a nice trigger job for me in the sights. Sights are millet sights, because these were the sights that were low enough in order for them to fit on this gun. It has a little bit of a pre-travel, which I like, to get set on there so I don't get any accidental shots off. And the trigger's about 2.5 pounds. So it's a fairly heavy trigger, but I like that because I find that a real light trigger you can't control.
Right.
This is probably the most unique gun at the match.
It is. Now it has this little unusual...
This is hopefully you don't have to reload at the Steel Challenge. This is okay because it's a fast reload would be a thumb reload over here, but this gun just doesn't have it. It can be made that way. And this is for, these holes here are for the aim point, if I'd like to shoot Bianchi with it.
they've got to learn the fundamentals and the basics and be able to apply them on demand. Sight alignment and trigger control is the first thing. You've got to learn to do it, be able to do it every time on demand. If you can't do it on demand at any speed, I'm talking about relatively slow by what we're doing now, you can't expect to be able to do it at these speeds we're shooting today. All this starts off the range at home. You're doing and programming. It's conditioned reflex. When you hear the beep, it should be subconscious. If I can make an illustration, if you can relate to coming home and walking into your house, 90% of the time you've got your key out, you're talking, whatever, you walk up, you put the key in the lock, you don't think about it, but you do it. And you open the lock, you walk right in. You let it be raining, the kids are having fuss, you know, the telephone's ringing, you go up and you try to do that, and you can't put your key in the lock to save your life because you're constantly trying to do it. You have to stop and look and put the key in and make it a robotics type motion. That's something you cannot get into in this game. It's got to be a conditioned reflex. Wow. It's one of those things like we're sitting here now. If I want to reach up and adjust my hat, I don't think about doing my left hand, my right hand, where do I place my hand on the bill. It's already programmed in the memory banks how to do it.
It's kind of like a muscle memory thing, huh?
Right, conditioned reflex. And that's what we're doing when we're shooting. Now, we do a lot of work at home determining where to mount the holster, how to grip the gun, and so forth. We're using the new combat assault holster being marketed by Rogers Safariland. I wear it in the right front position. I try to come in, and very important for me to get the shooting grip in the holster.
So once you grab that gun, you're set.
Right. You do not have time, once you clear the leather, to adjust your grip, move higher on the gun, lower on the gun, or vice versa. So you must have a perfect shooting grip in the holster before you ever clear the leather. Okay. And when I'm coming up, bringing the gun up, I want to bring the gun up high in the line of sight and push the gun straight to the target. You don't want to over the top or under the bottom. Should come up like a punch straight to the target. So come out and go out and punch to the target, and the gun should stop, and for a millisecond you should see a perfect sight picture on the target. That's one of the toughest things to learn in practical shooting, is learn what is an acceptable sight picture for the shot required. You must have the mental ability to shoot at your own cadence, letting your sights dictate the cadence of fire. If your sights are not lined up, you don't break the shot until they are aligned, whether it's a half a second, 2 seconds, or a tenth of a second. I see. You've got to have the mental ability to change gears and let the sights dictate when you break the shot. I'm shooting a modified Weaver. The difference with the Weaver I'm going to a full lockout with the arm, and with the idea of the arm pulling back into the shoulder and locking in like a rifle stock, and I've got a turret position.
So you don't really move the lower body?
No. Well, yes, I do turn from the lower trunk.
Oh, I see, but not the feet are planted.
Right.
And you're pretty wide, I saw.
Yeah. With the idea, you're coming up, you're locking in, you're twisting with the trunk. You're leaving the upper body all locked up in shooting position, where the point when you're looking with the front sight, no matter what, anywhere you look. When you're shooting, the front sight is your focal point. Most successful shooters will use some portion of the finger between the first joint and the tip of the finger. I've got a rather large hand for the auto pistol, so I tend to run just out of the first joint here. Ideally, it should be in the center of the pad.
Because you get more of a straight pullback?
Right. The idea, wherever you position your trigger finger on the trigger, it must be so where when you pull the trigger moves straight to the rear, and it doesn't cause the sights to deviate left or right or up and down. This Starts Life is a Colt government model. It's a 38 Super, very similar to the 45 as far as frame and mannerisms, which everybody's familiar with, the old government model. It's been converted to a race gun by several additions. Mainly, we have a compensator that I developed in 1980. Primary function for the compensator, it reduces recoil and muzzle rise. Makes the gun easier to shoot and allows us to shoot it faster. We start out, we take the frame and checker it, metal checkering, front and rear, and also on the trigger guard to allow you to hang on to the gun better. Fully adjustable sights, it's got a Bowmar sight system on it that's been milled into the slide to get the sight picture lower to the weapon, make it more compact. It's adjustable sight, but you'll find most of the time once you get the gun sight in, you leave it alone. From start to finish, including the cost of the gun, you're looking at approximately $2,000 for a full house race gun.
And this is like top of the line?
Right, this is our top of the line model. It doesn't take near this expensive a gun to be competitive. What this does, it allows you to make mistakes sometimes and get away with it.
On a regular basis, it depends if you're off season or if it's during the season. Off season, we don't shoot a whole lot. We'll shoot a lot of local matches. We have a match a week in our area, so we'll shoot some club matches, but we don't practice terribly hard off season. We get a little break from it. During the season, though, we'll be practicing for whatever match is coming up. Like the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been practicing real hard for this one, getting ready for this one. And at the same time, though, this year we had to practice for Bianchi, of course, it being next week. We'll practice the stages of fire. We'll get our equipment ready for this particular match, have everything ready for this one. So we don't really do much generalized practice. It's whatever is the next one. And we'll come home after going to Bianchi, and the next match is going to be the Nationals in July, I believe. That's what we're going to be shooting. We're shooting IPSC type shooting.
Well, now a lot of guys say they do more dry firing at home than they do actually shooting live rounds. So what about you?
Probably not quite as much dry firing, but that's what I do on a daily basis. I handle the guns every day. I'll probably do draws every day and dry fire every day. Weekends are when I do most of my shooting. I don't shoot, I don't have a daily regimen. I'm going to go out and work on this exercise today or shoot, a set course of fire every day. I don't have some sort of regimen I follow. I don't like to do that. I'd much prefer to.
What do you do? You watch while you're watching TV, or what do you
a lot of the time while I'm watching TV, it depends. Usually the targets aren't good on TV.
Right.
I mean, I like to shoot at small objects because you want to be harder than it is for what you're shooting in practice. So I'll use the little screws on light sockets, stuff like this, make very good targets because they're very small. And what you're trying to do is you keep the sight steady. You don't want the sights to move as the hammer falls.
Right.
Just click, nothing moves. That's when you're doing it right.
So you stand there and you practice drawing, bring that gun to
A lot of drawing, yeah. Drawing becomes very important. This particular match with the pistol segment, draws, you're going to do a draw for every single run of every single stage. So you got 6 stages, 5 runs each. You're doing 30 draws here. They've got to be good. You lose a 10th on each one, you're way behind even before you've even shot.
Right.
So you want your draws to be very good. So you work a lot on that. All the matches stress a draw. Well, when you get to the match, ideally you will have gotten most of the mechanical functions down. The movement to the gun and bringing the gun out should no longer be something you think about.
Right.
What you want to think about at that point is what you're about to do. What you want to do is see the sights on the target. And you want to hesitate. You want to pause on the target and see the gun in recoil. If you see the gun hesitate on the target and recoil on the target, you're going to hit the target. It's when you don't see anything that you're going to be in trouble. What I think about as I'm getting ready to shoot is one small thing. It doesn't take much to tie your mind up, to calm it down a little bit. So I'll think about wanting to see the sights on the target or hesitating on target. It's very common here. Being relaxed. You'll see people who are going to draw like this and do kind of a scooping motion. That's slow. That's slow, it's not consistent, it's hard to do. Well, some people, I'm not able to do it, can draw and bring the gun up in a pushing motion like that. That's also, for some stages, that's very good, but it's not the best for everything. My draw is really, it's a compromise between both. It comes up and I bring it up kind of lower, like in this motion. That way, on a quick stage, I'm able to shoot from here without locking all the way out if I have to. But if it's a very accurate shot, it's no slower because I'm just almost out.
Right.
So it's kind of a compromise. You adjust it to the stage you have to shoot for the course of fire. I look at the targets because I know where the gun is. I can feel it's hanging on my belt. I don't need to look at it to see it. I know where it's sitting at. Yeah, I've put my hand on it 1,000 times. Literally millions probably. I don't need to look at it to see where it is. I mean, I can reach in my pocket and pull out my car keys. I don't have to look at it.
Right.
I can draw my gun. I don't have to look at it.
I want to really bring the gun up to the target.
Sure, I'm more concerned about what I'm going to shoot. I need to hit the target, so I better be looking at where I'm going to shoot, not where I'm going to find something to shoot with.
And because of practice, I guess you bring that gun up to
Sure,
the same place, huh?
every time. It becomes a grooved-in motion, much like a golf swing. After you're swinging a couple million times, you're not going to have to look at your shoulder. You don't have to watch your elbows and watch your foot position.
Right.
That stuff happens automatically. Well, I'll change the gun around as to how I feel for the day or the particular course of fire. Sometimes you'll want to set up on the stage where you're pointing your body in a natural pointing position. Say you want to shoot to the right, is where you want your natural point, but you have a target shoot to the left. I'm going to move the holster around a little bit so it's more in line with the target, because you're going to draw that direction, even though you might be faced slightly to another direction.
Right.
There's no absolute here. You do what works for yourself, and you have to modify. You take a look at what everybody's doing and change things around a little bit. If we have to put a name on the stance I use, it would be a variation of an isosceles, basically. But it's not really, because perfect isosceles is elbows locked, arms are equidistant, and you are square onto the target. We shoot a little bit with the right foot, or if you're right-handed, right foot back slightly.
Right.
The left hand may be bent, left arm may be bent slightly, may not. It's not something that is an absolute. We bend at the waist, twist from the waist, and that's much the same as the isosceles. I don't shoot the Weaver stance. I can't shoot the Weaver stance very well. I don't like it. I don't think it is the hot setup. But, you know, some people do very well with it. Obviously, for them, that is the way to do it. You don't want your trigger finger too far back or too far forward, so the length of your trigger becomes very important. If it's too far back, you've got your finger back in a cocked motion.
Right.
If you just let your hand relax there, it goes right there, right? Just flip your hand around and look where it goes. That's ideally where the trigger should end up. So usually most people use a longer trigger, because that works a little better for most people. Some people's short hands need a short one. Well, the gun starts out this year. What we're using is a Springfield Armory model 1911, which is, it's the same gun basically as the Colt and all its variations of the 45. The gun started off as a 9mm. We've converted them over to 38 Super, because that's the caliber that works the best for all the matches we need an automatic for. So the gun starts out as that, the basic automatic. From then on, we change practically everything. You keep the basic configuration, but you're going to use a muzzle brake with a muzzle brake with a special barrel to improve the accuracy. It's going to have adjustable sights on it, so you can zero the gun perfectly. That's very important. The gun has to shoot exactly where the sights look. You have to have that perfect. You checker the gun to make the gun not slip in your hand when you're sweat. You may change little things like beaver tail, grip safeties for more support or for an easier draw. The triggers are adjusted so that they're very light, probably 2.5, 2.25 pounds is an average for most shooters. The guns are hard chromed. The metalloy is the surface that's on our guns, because it's very durable. I mean, I've yet to see it wear through. Oh, yeah. It's very slick and it's very hard. You take a metalloid gun and if you've drawn it 1,000 times, you wipe it off and it looks brand new. You take a gun that's blued, you draw it 10 times, and now it's got polished areas on it where it's starting to go through. So it is very durable. Basically, you change the gun around so that it suits you better. It's more comfortable for you to handle. A match like this really takes a lot of good gun handling. You need to be very smooth with the gun. You have to be able to pick up targets, so the gun has to be very friendly to you. You don't want any sharp edges. If the gun is not comfortable in your hand, you're going to think about that instead of your shooting.
Depends on the match. Like this match where the draw is real important, you know, you can save 1/10 of a second every single time you draw the pistol. Why, I practice a lot of draws, and I have a hang-up with drawing in the first shot, so that's real important to me. So I work on that a lot, vary my techniques a little here and there depending on the course of fire. On something like Bianchi, where the draw is not really that critical, there I just concentrate more on shooting, because the first shot speed is not important.
So do you draw in the house a lot? Or?
Yeah, I do a lot of drawing in the house, yeah. I just like to do that. I have a lot of fun doing that. So.
Sure. Well, what do you aim at? Like just any little...
Yeah, I do two ways. I do a mirror, just to watch all my movements and make sure I'm not raising my shoulder when the hand goes down. Make sure all the the motions are correct and fundamentally correct. And then I do just drawing at a spot on the wall to so that I'm not concentrating on fundamentals, just concentrating on bringing the gun to the right spot. Do those two. Well, my stance is fairly straight onto the target. My right arm is usually fairly straight. It varies a lot. Yeah, my right arm, like if I was shooting that way, my right arm's pretty straight. My left arm is almost all the way straight. My hand is holding the pistol actually forward instead of pulling it back.
Right, right. So both your arms are almost straight, right?
Right, they're almost straight, yeah. And to me, that just, anything besides that is more of a force type of a grip. That's when I started shooting, I shot real typically, what was taught. But the more I started thinking about what was going on, the less that started happening. And the change just was a real gradual change over a period of time. It wasn't something I decided one day I was going to do. And now I just find myself shooting with a much more relaxed position instead of a tense position. For me, when I grip the pistol, the trigger sets right next to the first joint. to get out toward the end of the trigger finger, while I have to force my hand out a little bit.
Big hands.
Right, so I got long fingers and big hands, yeah, so that's just where my finger goes, so that's where it is.
Yeah, because some people do the tip. Like
Right, Robbie's got a lot shorter hands, his finger's a lot shorter.
Uh-huh.
So that's just where they end up for him. Well, the things that are important for me is I just grip the pistol comfortably with the right hand, and after I flip the safety off on the draw, well, I just leave my right thumb up like that, and I just work the left hand into where the heel of my hand can get right in on the grip there, and actually kind of hold the gun forward, so it's actually camming the muzzle down with this hand. And it's probably using about 60% of the gripping force, and the right hand's using about 40%, so that my right hand can use a firm but somewhat relaxed grip. My left hand can be used to hold the gun down, and that way my right finger can work the trigger at its fastest possible speed.
Let's see where the trigger falls on your finger there.
Okay, the trigger falls right at the joint there, right in front of the joint. Is where comfortably, yeah. See, now for me to get my tip on the gun, I have to force my finger out. My hands and fingers are long enough that where I grip the gun, that's just where my finger goes naturally. So and then you also kind of, in this type of grip, you clamp down with your right thumb a little bit on your left hand. It just locks the gun in your hand real securely. I think if Rob uses a real similar grip, if you watch our guns in recoil, well, it's real evident that grip works. If the targets are close and easy to hit, I focus quite a bit more on the targets, and I see the gun in sights of my peripheral vision. And if the targets are farther away, like in states like outer limits, well, then I tune in on pretty much just the sights. You can shoot either way with just as good a success, really. It all depends. The important thing is that you're aware of what you're doing when you're doing it, not in the way you do it. Well, we changed the Springfield Armory guns. These guns, it's a relatively new gun, just being marketed by Springfield Armory, and they let us try some out to kind of give us some feedback on them, and they really excellent guns, and the price on the guns is real competitive. It's a little bit lower than the other guns on the market, and the quality's absolutely just as good. It's pretty much an identical copy of a Colt, and these guns were made without the full lug barrel with the bushing for lighter weight on the barrel, just particularly for this match and the speed event at the Bianchi Cup, where you're trying to get the pistol to work with as light a load as possible because there's no power factor. And so we can load our loads down real light with a 158 grain bullet, and these guns just really function really well. And this particular gun just shoots real accurately, and it's just the best light load gun that I've ever had. It just worked absolutely perfectly.
Well, it's got some nice modifications on it. Plus, it's got a nice shiny finish on it. Tell me about it.
Right, the finish is it's a hard chrome. It's called Metalloy. It's a finish that Bill Wilson uses. It's just ultra hard. It wears real good together, and you can do a million draws with it out of your holster, and it doesn't affect the finish at all. It just just looks like it's brand new, and it holds up real well. On the front here, that's just a compensator on the end. That's the LEK style compensator. It's got a hole in the top here that vents the gas upward to keep the muzzle down and recoil, and adds a little weight too. It slows the opening down on the gun, makes the gun a little bit more manageable. On this type of shooting where tenths of a second separate places all the way through, why every single fraction is very important, down to the hundredths of a second. So you're going for the absolute lowest recoil you can get.
Talk to me about the trigger and about the checkering and the sights too.
Okay. The trigger on this gun, most of my match guns, I like a fairly light trigger, around 2.5 pound area, and the sights are just standard Bomar sights. The checkering on the gun is 30 line front and rear, and that just gives you quite a bit more of a secure grip. So once you grip the pistol, it doesn't shift in your hand during recoil. It's also been changed with a Wilson-style beaver tail grip safety, and it fits in your hand, just makes the gun fit in your hand quite a bit better.
I found out this year I probably wasted a lot of ammunition trying to get good, because I thought, I've got to shoot, I've got to get this good, instead of making each shot in practice really count, practicing it like it was the real match. It's hard to do in practice. It's easy to stop and try and start over again and give yourself a little leeway. I mean, you don't need to be that hard on yourself, but put most of your time in your practice of what you would do in the match. I do little things like when I have an empty magazine, I never put it back in my magazine pouch. I put it in my pockets or whatever, because then in a match when you're under pressure, sometimes if you accidentally do that, I watched Lee Cole draw an empty magazine at Bianchi and go on the line. She had 3 shots left or 4 shots left, and that was it, her gun, and you can't get it back. And so that's just one of the things that I do in practice, because you never know under pressure what you're going to be doing, and you don't want to go into old habits or whatever. So in practice, I try and concentrate on my front sight, watching the front sight, my trigger control, especially for this match. And there'll be times where I've got my front sight on the plate and I'm missing, and I can't figure out why. A lot of times if you go back and try and rehearse what's going on, you'll find you weren't locked in behind the gun, meaning your arm. I shoot with a straight elbow, and it's pretty well locked.
Yeah, you do. You kind of look right down your arm.
It's easier for me, and it's easier to keep my eye in line. Sometimes, well, when I first started, I learned the best way for your shooting stance and everything to be is to have as little variation as possible. If you shoot with a bent knee, some days you may have it bent more, some days you may have it bent less. If you shoot with a bent arm, the same way. So if you can keep it kind of locked in and have as little variation as possible, then you're more apt to hit that stance every time on time.
It's kind of muscle memory.
It is. And so that's one of the things I practice also. But once you've gotten that down, then the main things is your mind, your front sight, your trigger control. And a lot of times I'm finding out if I'm missing the target and I'm looking at it and my sights are on the target, I'm usually slapping the trigger. And that's, sometimes you don't realize it, and that's real hard to catch.
Well, speaking of trigger pull, what part of the finger do you use? You have smaller hands than most of these guys. Let's see your finger. What do you pull? What are you shooting?
I use the pad, just the front pad of my finger. And when I find that I'm slapping the trigger, sometimes I've put my trigger finger in too far. So really, you're just supposed to put the pressure right here. So you don't. That keeps your, I guess.
Tactile sense.
It does, and when you wrap it around too much, then you'll have a tendency to jerk it or even pull the muzzle one side or the other. And so just to keep it with a pad. In fact, people even do exercises where they squeeze a ball with all their hand but leave their trigger finger loose, and they'll squeeze and try and get the muscle build up, but keep their finger, dexterous, or however you want to say it, limber.
Well, now your actual method, not your method, but your stance and your that straight arm of yours. Describe that. Is there a name for that? Is that a weaver, isosceles, or what is it?
Gosh, it's a hall. Well, it's a weaver modified, I suppose. And I don't know that it really ever has had a.
Because you kind of drop your head down, and you look right down that arm.
And well, another thing it does too is, like when I'm pulling I put the gun out. If I have my head here with my ear muscle touch my arm. That's also kind of a guide for me. Then I know my head's down, and it's another little gauge. It's another little checkpoint where it's easier for me to get into the same spot every time. The straight arm for me, I lock in behind the sights. My bent arm holds, I bend it straight down. In fact, I noticed one time in practice I was missing, and I was letting this elbow fly. But what helps me, because we're not as strong as men, is this arm to be straight down, and that way it helps the recoil control if I keep my elbow pulled in. It's just like any type of shotgun shooting or rifle shooting. When you keep that elbow in, you have more control. Your muscles have an easier time of fighting any kind of recoil. For some reason, when you let that elbow go out, your muscles are loosening and you lose a lot of the control that you have. And you find out what works for you in practice, and then when you find it, you try and repeat it as often as you can, get the muscles to remember, and then that's when you start tuning in on your front sight and your trigger control and the mental game. Once you've got the fundamentals, it's basically a mental game after that. I've been thinking to hit one-shot hits, just hit the target, to slow down, trying to hit the center of the plate. So often with your front sight, in the close range, you've got a margin for error. The sights don't exactly have to be lined up and you can hit the plate. Well, when that happens, and if you start letting that happen, you're going to start missing. So if you just it doesn't even take a 1/10 of a second longer to just slow down and not pull the trigger until the sights are right. It takes maybe a 1/10, 2/10 of a second longer on your overall time. which is much better than a miss, because a miss is oh gosh, sometimes it takes up about half a second, 3/10 of a second. It does. Then you start getting rattled.
Yeah, and I see guys when they miss, they have to go back and doing all that.
And it just, and then you start getting rattled, and then now I'm under pressure. The main thing I think about is trying to get a first run that's smooth with no misses, because you get to throw one run out. I haven't done that. This morning was the first time, and then you don't have the pressure. When you have a real good smooth first run, it may be slow, but all your hits are there. Then you start getting confidence. If you blow your first run, you start wondering, oh, am I going to miss? I can't miss anymore. And I try not to think negative. I try not to think, don't miss. Because that
throws you off.
Psychologically, you've almost programmed yourself to miss. So I think, okay, center hits, squeeze the trigger, under control, just, I try not to tell myself to slow down as much as I do shoot my sights, because that will slow you down. But if you intentionally slow down, sometimes you can force it, just let it go naturally. If you're trying to force yourself to slow down, if the sight picture is there, your mind wants to pull the trigger, then you're fighting. So it's just a big mental game. And so mainly the things I try and tell myself is to hit the target on the first shot, center hits, squeeze the trigger, and just be in control.
I push myself to limit in practice. I constantly keep trying to find my limits and how far I can push myself. And I practice a lot of speed shooting.
What are you at in the range shooting? How many rounds you shoot? What kind of what do you do?
Well, it depends. I will only shoot until I start to feel that I've had enough. Sometimes it may only be 50 rounds. Sometimes I'm having a good time and I'll stay there and shoot 500-600 rounds. When I first started, I shot 400 rounds plus every day for the first month to get myself up to the level where I thought I could start to be a little competitive. As you start progressing in the sport, you find that you don't have to practice every day, and you don't have to shoot in mass quantities of ammunition. I'm the point now where it's more mental than it is. You can only go so far, and you'll progress gradually with your shooting, but the mental game is what you really have to start working on.
You talked about practicing on the range. What about at home? Do you do any type of dry firing, drawing, that kind of stuff?
I used to do a lot of dry firing. I don't do as much as I should, but I handle my firearm a lot. I sit at the TV, or when I'm walking around the house, usually before matches, I carry my weapon around with me, dry fire at the wall, snap it at the TV, things like that. Always looking at a sight picture, getting the feel of the weapon. I look at the target. I'm listening for the split second that I hear that buzzer, not the full tone, just the start of the beep. I'm going for my weapon. I don't necessarily get a good grip on the gun when I first put my hand on it. It's usually as I'm bringing it up, I'm adjusting my grip. I believe in trying to get the weapon out as fast as you can and get that first shot off and then start going with it. But I usually try to bring the weapon up into my field of view, and I'm looking for that front sight. I'm looking for the black on white, as it would be here, the black front sight on the white background of the target. What I start to do when I hear the buzzer, I'm going down for the weapon. I start to get a grip. As I'm bringing the gun up, I'm getting my grip. I pull the weapon up into my field of view, and I'm looking for the front sight before I actually get it on the target. I set my head down to the right just a little bit, and I try to, for steel shooting, I try to lock my arms out. And I lay my head down on my arm, and I try to make my upper body one solid mass so that all I do is pivot at the waist. And where I look is where the gun is. The sights are always, they should be lined up for every shot. When I come down on my weapon, I usually come down like this. Come up, and I'm bringing my hand in like this as I'm bringing the weapon up. You always keep your finger out of that trigger. As soon as I start breaking the plane, where I want to start to shoot at, I put the safety off and put my finger in a turret guard, and I'm looking for the front sight. Usually tip the gun up just a little bit. I look at the targets I'm going to shoot at, and I figure out a rhythm in my mind before I shoot, so that when I get up there, I know how I want to shoot it. I have the rhythm in my subconscious, and it more or less dictates the pace. The only time I try to change that is if I miss or something like that. You try to get some kind of rhythm formed before you start shooting.
When a big match is coming up, you know, I put in quite a bit of time. I'll practice 2 to 3 weeks before a major tournament. I'll practice at least 3 days a week. You know,
Shoot a lot of rounds, or?
Not so much as a lot of rounds as frequent practice. It seems to do me more good. You know, to shoot 200 rounds like in the morning, 200 rounds in the afternoon, and do it more frequently than to go out and shoot 1,000 rounds in one day.
Right.
You know, I get more good out of that. And you know, before the major matches, I'll practice at least 3 weeks prior to them. A minimum of 3 days a week, you know, like I said, a couple sessions a day. So, and then right close to the end of the practice time, you know, I'll shoot almost every day.
Okay, so you shoot basically the whole course then, right? You
Yeah.
go through every stage? If you have any rough spots, do you concentrate on that, or what do you do?
What we'll normally do, like on practice for the Bianchi Cup here, we'll go ahead and we'll go out and shoot the whole match through, and then, like you say, we'll have certain areas we'll be having the most problem with. We'll go back and shoot those stages 2 or 3 more times, and go right back through those stages. And we practice the entire match except for the speed event here. We normally don't really shoot it. This year, the Steel Challenge, as you know, it was right together, so we were having to practice Steel Challenge during the same time, and that helped for the speed event here, you know. Well, what I always tell myself, you know, right as the start signal is about to go off, if there's a certain thing in that course that I have to really keep my mind on to keep from making an error, that's what I try to have in my mind the last instant before the buzzer goes off. Like on the speed shoot here, you know, I'm thinking that I want to get a rapid draw and see the front sight on every target and hesitate on each target. You know, that's, you know, I'm telling myself the key words, you know, front sight and hesitate. I'll shoot, I guess, what you'd call a modified weaver stance. You know, everybody either shoots a weaver or an isosceles stance, like Brian and Rob, where they stand with both feet square to the shooting line, you know, and shoot essentially like this. It's more of an isosceles. I stand more with my right foot back, my left foot a little bit farther forward, and more of a position like this. So your left elbow is a little bit bent. Yeah.
They kind of thrust both arms out. Why do you do that? You just picked it up that way, or?
I started shooting back before any of the other shooting styles were really prevalent. That was the popular way, and it's always worked out pretty good for me. And I just haven't really had the time to try the other stance to see if it would work better for me. You lose a little bit of recoil control when you stand the straight-on isosceles type stance, and you know, I'm not really willing to give that up. Okay, there's, you know, essentially 2 grips that people use. You know, a lot of the shooters will flip the safety off and leave their thumb on top of the safety, and then they'll get their, I can't do it with their weight on the gun, but they'll get their finger out front on the trigger guard. You know, that's a popular grip.
Right.
But personally, I like to flip the safety off and let my thumb go on down low, and then wrap my hand around the front of the gun.
And, so you get all 4 fingers down.
Yeah, all the way down, and the safeties.
And the thumb locks in, or what?
Yeah, it's just squeezing in this way, squeezing into this one. You know, like that. That's essentially the same grip that John Shaw shoots too. You know, we're, you know, 2 shooters that use essentially the same grip, and then there's a lot of other. Robbie shoots something very similar, except he leaves his thumb on top of the safety most of the time. This kind of started out, this is a standard Colt government model, is what it started out at in 38 Super. And essentially we've replaced every part on the gun with the exception of the slide frame and a couple of internal parts in the action work. Everything else is custom parts.
Okay, well, first of all, the finish is different, and this thing is way different. Give me an idea, what is that?
Okay, I like a gun that balances right in front of my knuckles when I'm holding the gun. You know, like if I'm holding it like this, I like the point of balance right ahead of my knuckles. And so I shoot a little heavier gun than some competitors do. So it's just an add-on weight, essentially, just to make the gun balance the way I want it to balance. And you know, we've got our AccuComp system here, which is a heavy compensator barrel on the gun. You know, dampen the effects of recoil both by barrel weight and by the compensator port in in the front of the gun.
Push the gases, right?
Yeah, it vents the gases upward, which pushes the muzzle down and cuts the recoil down the gun. We've got checkering both front and back to help you hang on to the gun if your hands are, perspiring or whatever.
I guess when the competition happens, you get a little bit
Yeah,
nervous.
that happens sometimes, and we have, adjustable sights and trigger job, all the reliability work to make it totally reliable.
They got the holes here in the trigger. Why are they there?
That's kind of a company trademark. It's the actual purpose is to lighten the trigger. The lighter weight the trigger itself is, the less chance you have a trigger bounce tripping the sear in the gun. But it was kind of turned into a company trademark on all of our guns.
Practical shooting is an individualistic sport. You have to be in control of yourself. You're the captain of your own ship. You have to make yourself do what is necessary. It's like a professional golfer, a tennis player. He's out there by himself. He has to do it himself. He has to maintain control. And after you've learned the pure basics of shooting, just like a golfer, putting, after that, 90 to 95% of it is mental control and making yourself do what is necessary at the time.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Number 1, fully automatic machine gun fun. In this program, we'll look at automatic weapons from around the world, including the Beretta P12S from Italy, the Colt M16 from the United States, from Israel, the Uzi 9mm, the Russian AK-47, the Ingram MAC-10. It's all here, plus lots more, so sit back and get ready to rock and roll.
Shooter, stand by. Ready.
What's it like to be known as the fastest, most accurate pistol shooter alive? Only one man knows for sure. Rob Latham of Mesa, Arizona. Today, he's putting that reputation on the line because as this exciting four-stage pistol competition unfolds, he'll be challenged by more than 200 of the best pistol shooters in the world, all competing for $150,000 in cash and prizes as the 1985 National Rifle Association's Bianchi Cup gets underway.
We have 5 events. It's all on steel targets. Each course is different from the next. Every shooter shoots a total of 5 courses of fire, or 5 stages. and they throw out their worst event. Again, we're trying to promote speed. We want to get that, let it all hang out type of an atmosphere. And this way, if you have a disaster run, a gun malfunction, or the shooter just simply doesn't do well one time, that's out of his head, and he can keep on pushing for a better score.
That's Mike Fitchman, who along with Mike Dalton developed the course of fire you're about to see. Described in 2 words, it's speed and steel. Because today, more than 250 of the world's fastest and most accurate pistol shooters compete against the clock and themselves as the 1984 Steel Challenge World Speed Shooting Championship gets underway. Soldier of Fortune magazine presents the 1984 Soldier of Fortune Convention. In this videotape, we'll take you rappelling down the side of a 14-story building, racing through the desert on the Warrior fast attack vehicle. And here's something new and different this year, pugil stick competitions. Plus you'll see all phases of the Soldier of Fortune 3-gun combat match with pistol, rifle, and shotgun. The latest weapons demonstrated by the manufacturers themselves. New products at the Military Arms and Collectors Show. Speakers including Soldier of Fortune magazine publisher Robert K. Brown, Major General J.K. Singlaub, and Afghan freedom fighter Hassan Galandi. And of course, more of what's made the Soldier of Fortune convention what it is today. The sport of combat shooting is not new. While the Southwest Pistol League is generally credited with starting the competition aspect of combat shooting, the roots stretch back to the training of Union soldiers during the Civil War. The military has been utilizing combat methods since the introduction of the 1855 rifle musket, the first military rifle with precision sights. Military training consisted of both rifle and handgun practice. And although law enforcement agencies such as the FBI have been using the shotgun in training and on duty, combat shotgun competitions have only been introduced in the last decade. The popularity of such events, such as the Steel Challenge, which has its own separate shotgun match, has brought the shotgun into mainstream combat shooting. One of the consistent top contenders in the shooting sports is John Shaw. Shaw has won more major tournaments and finished consistently higher than any other combat shooter in the world. His victories include the 1980 and 1981 IPSC National Championships, gold medals in the International IPSC Championships, and 5 consecutive Soldier of Fortune Shotgun Championships. His speed and accuracy have earned him the title of the fastest shotgun in the world. When not competing and not practicing, he also teaches combat shooting to law enforcement personnel, military personnel, and civilians at his own Mid-South Institute of Self-Defense Shooting, MISS, which he founded in 1982. He has also written 2 books on shooting, Shoot to Win and You Can't Miss. John Shaw recently conducted a shotgun seminar at the 1986 Steel Challenge. Here are the highlights of that seminar.